as Professor Slime. That's exactly what I love to do. And I'm happy to talk and share everything about slugs. So again, thank you very much for, for highlighting this and inviting me to come talk to you today. So today we're gonna, you're actually gonna earn your degree in slugology. And so there are some handouts, and you did get, I already gave you your diploma because I have high hopes for you. You're gonna make it through. And so for today's talk, that's what we're gonna do. So, so you have your handout there. 90% of the stuff that I'm gonna say is already in it. There's a few of the stories and anecdotes that aren't in there, but that's again, just my personal experiences with things there along the way. As Mary said, I've been doing this slugs, started as a young age. I grew up in Michigan. I used to pay my sister to weed my portion of our family garden so that I could play with the slugs instead. I ended up getting my degree at Central Michigan University, and what got me interested about here, specifically the Pacific Northwest, is because there was a whole chapter in our training book back then that said the Pacific Northwest, the mecca of all slugs. So growing up in Michigan, I'm like, I have to get there eventually. Well, I eventually got there through a bunch of different jobs, and then petitioned to stay here. My first job was at the YMCA Camp Coleman, running their outdoor environmental education schools out past Gig Harbor. My first day on the job, I walked up to the whole group of fifth graders had all come to a 3-day camp there. I got up there, the parent chaperone had a Starbucks cup, and all of a sudden there was a banana slug crawling up the side of it. I went back to my professor and emailed them that night and said, I'm gonna live and die here. This is it. So I literally have been here since 1998, and again, my whole passion for slugs and snails has grown since then, just again, because they're everywhere, so it's kind of fun. All right, so are we ready for the ride?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so so in this case, give me a show of hands here, friend or foe. Where are you? With the thumbs up, you like them? Friends down, or like this? Where are you at with it? Okay, I'm looking around the room. I see some friends. Good. Okay, some are indifferent there. Some are more like this. Okay. My goal by the end of this talk, so wherever you are on that scale, is to move you 1 notch up. So if you are like this, I want you to end this talk by this. You see it? You see it? Okay, ready? Like that. That's how much I want to move your opinion of slugs and snails by the end of this talk. Okay? Then after that, if you want to learn more on that, you can eventually be like me, which is like super like this. Okay? So that would be good. All right, so this is me. This is a banana slug. So we're going to learn all about it. So what animal has 1 foot, 1 lung, more teeth than a shark?
Slug.
Slugs. You're in the right room. Good. Excellent. So there we go. And that's right. Here we got our legendary banana slug here. So the banana slug there is kind of the poster child for all slugs here again in the Pacific Northwest, and we're going to learn more about them. They are invertebrates, and what does that mean? No backbone. So they are squishy, cold-blooded. What does that mean? Yeah, their body temperature is the same as the environment. Okay, so they can't regulate their temperature themselves. So cold-blooded, meaning the temperature of whatever is in the environment is what the temperature of the animal is, or the critter is. So in this case, the slug has to protect itself because it doesn't have the ability to regulate its temperature. So when we see days like this, do we see a ton of slugs in the wintertime? No, they go away, they go down and hide underground in that because the temperatures, especially when we had that cold snap a few weeks ago there, they are not out and about. Okay, anything below 38 degrees is way too cold for them. Okay, the same reason do we see a ton of slugs above like 90-degree temperature? No, too hot again. They have to regulate moisture content is really the critical piece, and so that's by being cold-blooded. That's where their sweet part. And if you think about us, our springs and falls and even early summers, our perfect temperatures like 50 to 60 degrees. Even even getting up to low 70s, that's the perfect prime temperatures for slugs and snails. Okay, soft body typically live between 1 and 6 years. 6 years is at the extreme. There's only certain species in the world that do that. Most of them are 2 years, so up to 2 years as far as in they're 18 months, 2 years in that range as far as average life expectancy. Some, the smaller the slug, sometimes they have less life expectancies as well. And they are hermaphroditic, which means they have both males and females parts. And we'll get to that in a little bit here about what that means. So are there benefits to slugs?
Yes.
Yes. What do you think? What are they? Yep, they help decompose a lot of our dead decaying plant material. That's the #1 role.
Food for what animals?
Excellent. We were just talking about all these other benefits today about other animals, And slugs play a huge role in our huge ecosystem of animals. And so we're going to share some information about that. So they help, again, as we said, break down dead decaying plant material faster than anybody else. Disperse seeds and spores, help keep populations in check by other populations eating them from there or eating the parts of them that are left behind. And plus, they're cute. Look at that smile. He's got a cute little red tongue if you got close to it. Now, granted, it doesn't look like that, but in my head, that's what it looks like when it gets close. So if I was to look face to face with a slug, that's what it's going to look like. Super fun. Who are their family? So that's one of the other things we need to know about is how the slugs and snails are connected and who are their family members. We're part of a family. We have a family tree. They do too. And if you look at it, it's very kind of surprising how, if you look at some of their cousins in their family there, they are not typically ones that you would think. So when you look at them, where are most of these creatures found?
In the water.
In the water. So do we have snails or slugs that are from the water? Yeah, sea slugs, sea snails.
Right.
But then we have land ones. So guess what? They evolved. Those that came originally were from water and now have evolved over time into land. And so that's why there are certain parts of the slug, when we get to that, that are named closer to their friends, their family members, that are more ocean dwelling rather than land based. Okay, the ones that we're going to talk about today are from the class Gastropoda, which is slugs, snails, and limpets. And then we are going to focus today just on the air-breathing ones and that are land-based. So these are the orders and subclasses for this particular family tree. All right, so slug parts. This is really critical. Before we get into that, I would say overall there's about 2,000 species of slugs and snails there. And Pacific Northwest, we have a nice good variety of those as well. All right, so here is my friend Sluggy. He's been used for literally decades now, and he's showing his wear. But that being said, he's still a very good tool from there for us to showcase a little bit about some parts that are critical to the particular slugs that we're going to be talking about today. Number one thing about the slug, there's kind of some big identifying features. One is this big hump here. This is called the mantle. This is like kind of a armor or shield, because what happens when the slug is maybe startled or maybe feels threatened, what happens?
It curls up underneath it.
Yeah, it can contract, and this hood goes over these things here. What do you think these little protrusions are called?
Tentacles.
They actually are tentacles because they're related to who? Octopus. The octopus that we just saw. A lot of times they get mislabeled as antennae, but think about who belongs to antennae.
Insects.
Insects. Insects are not in their family tree. Remember, they were from octopus. So octopus have tentacles, so these are tentacles. Okay? So what happens is this mantle provides like a hood that goes over and they retract these down. And so that way then it's a protection, because up here is where where they eat, where they sense, where they smell, all of that stuff. And so if all of a sudden the slug's crawling around, all of a sudden a dog comes up, I'm going to use this mantle as a hood and cover all of my important parts. Okay. And also maybe contract myself a little bit there as well. So we have two sets of tentacles, which we're going to learn more about in a bit. The mantle here, we have a long muscular foot here. And then this band, some of the slugs have them, some don't. It's called a skirt. Sometimes can be brightly colored, others not. And then the other important part here is on the side, you can see this big hole there, and that's called the pneumostome, and we'll see that in just a minute here about learning what that does. Important thing to think about is that slugs do not have a brain. So as much as you think they're out there plotting against you, they are not, because they just have a series of nerve ganglion that is basically telling them and controlling what's in their body. So no brain. So that's one of the things to also keep in mind.
Is that the only creature that does not have a brain?
No, there are others too.
Really?
Yep. Okay, here's the pneumostome. How many have seen this hole before on a slug? Have you ever looked on the side of it before? Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's small. And if it's smaller, it's just because the fact is it's actively exchanging air through that hole. The lung is behind there. There also is a hole for lots of other things, including where the poop comes out. And so that's one of those things where it's a hole with multi-different functions. And so this is one of the things there, but you will see it get larger when the slug feels more threatened, because if I am trying to get away, I'm gonna need oxygen to help move me, which means I need to open up and try and get as much as I can breathe through my skin, which they do. In order to get away from, let's say, somebody that might be a predator, I need to get more oxygen into my body. So I'm gonna open that hole up there, get more oxygen in, so I can produce more mucus, so eventually I can slime quicker away, okay? So that's why you only see those holes when they're larger, because the fact is they're sensing you, especially if you're in their pocket, you know, maybe prodding them or that at that point, okay? Yes, single lung there. Okay. Tentacles. So tentacles there, again, we have two sets there. The top two are for sight and smell. If you ever actually get close to the top of a tentacle, you can see a black dot. That is, again, where they're sensing those lights and dark shades. They can't see color. They can sense outlines there, and you're wondering, like, how do we know this? There's actually a camera that was inserted into a tentacle of a slug that was actually taking pictures of what they would see.
Wow.
So yeah, pretty fascinating. So little black dots on there that are kind of sensing for sight and also for smell, which is weird because you would think the smells would be on the bottom, closer to the ground, but this is actually sensing the smell around the entire surface area where they're moving through, okay? The bottom ones are for tasting and touching, which does make sense because their mouth is right below it, okay? So if I'm out there slug and my purpose is to eat and get as much food there, these two tentacles are really helping me figure out what I am eating and where I can find more food, okay? They can move independently. All four can move in different directions at the same time. If a dog was to get one of the tentacles like this and rip it off, the tentacle can regenerate and grow another one, okay? And I think that's it from, yeah. Oh, yeah, and then they can retract them if they are in danger. All right, today it was great because there was a couple things that the previous speakers were talking about that I was like, this is exactly what I'm gonna say. So it's just more reinforcement about some of the ideas. One is food chains. As much as we hate, most folks don't like or despise slugs and snails, they actually play a valuable role in our food chain system, our overall habitats and environments here. So if you look at this food chain here, we've got the sun radiating down onto some soil there and a plant grows, then who would be the first one out of this listed area after that plant that might particularly eat that plant? Okay, so we got a slug. Slug's gonna eat the plant. Who's gonna eat the slug?
The coyote and the bird.
Okay, so we've got a bird, the owl, so that could have eaten that. We could. What was that?
The snake.
The snake could eat the slug. Who's gonna eat the snake?
The bird.
The owl, yep, or the bird there. Okay, what else? Anything else? Where's the toad? Where's the toad getting in there? So toad could eat the slug. Who eats the toad?
The snake or the bird.
Yep, snake, or the bird too, yep. So here are some sample food chains that are here in the Pacific Northwest. So sun plant, slug, snake, owl, sun plant, slug, toad, great blue heron, sun, dead decaying plant material, mushroom, slug, bird, coyote. Okay. Now, if we like anything of any of these animals in our yard, know that slugs are part of their food chain. So if you take the slugs and snails out, you are going to affect the animals higher in the food chain. Oops, sorry. From here, okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, are food chains that linear? No, in our world, there tend to be more web-like, but I'm just saying in this case, for you to understand that really slugs in the Pacific Northwest play a huge part in our food chain system, which most folks don't think. They just want to say, hey, I really like these animals up top. I want to make sure I keep those in my yard, or at least ability to see them out in nature when I want to see them, okay? Just know that slugs and snails are a part of that. All right, what animals eat slugs? Anyone? We learned a couple this morning already.
Birds, frogs.
Yep.
Snakes.
Snakes, yep. Moles and voles.
Ducks.
Our previous speaker. Yep, ducks, chickens, all that. So any of these crew that we have here also eat. So we have birds, snakes. Unfortunately, this garter snake is eating a banana slug. I would prefer them to eat a non-native slug, but that being said, it is one of the things that does happen. Toads, coyotes, skunks, raccoons, when I worked at Northwest Trek Wildlife Park out on the way out to Mount Rainier there, we had a raccoon group that was on display. They lived there. And one of the keepers every morning would put out their measured diet, which is in the form of like a kibble, like a dog food type of kibble. And specially formulated for omnivores. And so specifically the raccoons were there eating their kibble, but they were kind of messy with it. And so there would be pieces that have gotten out of the bowls and things. And so at that point, I'd always see afterwards, the raccoons kind of going afterwards and doing this rolling motion. And sure enough, when I investigated a little bit more, they were slugs that came to eat the leftover kibble that the raccoon then would roll the slugs in soil and then eat them as candy. So basically it was like, they figured out that if I just take the slug and put it in my mouth, I'm gonna get a mouthful of slime. If I roll it in soil first and then eat it, I can eat it faster. And so they basically, that's one of the things that they would do, is that they would just end up using as extra protein sources for slugs and snails that had come in to eat the leftover kibble. So, some other things too about this, we have, again, these are higher in the food chain. Some spiders have actually been known to eat slug eggs below the ground. So that's something else to keep in mind. And then the other one, we've got two over here on the side. We've got this slug here and this predaceous beetle. Predaceous beetles eat all the leftover squished slug parts that when we roll them over with our cars or, you know, a bike or something else there, somebody's got to come along and be the rest of the, you know, the rest of the cleanup crew. Right. So the predaceous beetles are the ones that eat all of our squished stuff. That's slugs and snails that have kind of not made it. The other one here is this slug here. And yes, there are only a few in the world that are cannibalistic, meaning this slug will eat another slug. And this is known as the leopard slug. We do have them here in the Pacific Northwest, right here in our Mason County too, Thurston County, etc., all over the Pacific Northwest. And they are cannibalistic, which means they eat other slugs. So as gardeners, you're thinking, great, I want those in my yard because then they can eat all the rest. Well, actually, they are invasive, highly invasive, and they are not the ones we do want in our yards. We prefer them not to be, and I'll explain why in a little bit, okay? So shrew, salamanders, moles, and voles are also in this crew. Okay, so what do slugs eat? Everything, yes. Okay, so yes. So this two pictures on the screen here. This one is funny because we were on a garden tour with our Master Gardener volunteers touring another public garden. And sure enough, they came over and they're like, Corey, look, this slug chewed you a heart and a leaf for you in this hosta. So I was like, sure enough, I went over, had to take a picture of it. I was like, slug love right there. And even the slide trail is even left behind on it. It's like, it's perfect. So yes, I thought it was sweet. This little guy here was eating this daffodil, and I'll tell you this, the daffodil was already on its way out. So it wasn't like it was a brand new one. So I was just curious to see how long it would take this little slug in order to eat all of the yellow petals from this daffodil. Any idea how long it would take that little guy?
Couple hours.
Couple hours. Anybody else?
2 days.
2 days, okay. Try 8 minutes.
The whole flower in 8 minutes?
Yeah, there was 90% of all that yellow was gone within 8 minutes.
Wow.
Yep. And we timed it, we watched it. So yeah, it was fascinating just to see the fact how quickly, and that's because they have a pretty interesting mouth structure here we're gonna share about in a minute. So here's some of the things they eat. Dead decaying plant material up here in your top left. Mushrooms, you can see the slug coming into a mushroom itself. Vegetables, of course, your prized vegetables, especially anything hanging over a raised bed is prime, you know, food for those, even though let's say some of our native slugs don't necessarily prefer to eat those things. But if they're hanging in their way, for example, a strawberry dangling over a raised bed, right, a native slug is going to eat that strawberry. It'd be like us going past an ice cream or a candy store and going, oh no, we can't. Like, not gonna happen, okay? So that's one of the things that's important. Our prized plants, unfortunately, yes, they do eat our plants. And hopefully by the end of this talk here, I'll give you some tools in order for you to help figure out what's gonna be best for your group, for your grouping of plants. If you feed pets outside, they will come. In fact, it's like an attractant. They can smell that and they're just like, great, you've now fed me for, you know, what I need at that. So any of the food stuff out there. Other slugs, as we said, the one that we have here that's cannibalistic is the leopard slug. And then underground, they feed a lot also, which we don't necessarily see. But the fact is, when they go down below to protect themselves in either too hot or too cold environments, they're also eating fungus. They're eating all kinds of other things, materials that are in the soil as well. And so they're processing a lot of stuff underground that we're not even necessarily aware of. All right, so feeding time here. So I alluded to earlier that they have a pretty ferocious feeding system, and that's because in their mouth, which is right below their lower set of tentacles underneath the flap here, they have an estimated 27,000 backwards pointing teeth called radula. If you think about, if you were to put your hand in a shark's mouth and try to pull back, or if you had that toy when you were a kid, it was like a long tube that you put your fingers in and then you tried to pull back out and you couldn't get it out. Think about if we could do that with a slug's mouth, it would be the same thing. Meaning we put our finger in, we couldn't pull back because these backward pointing teeth are grabbing our finger in order to not release it. And that's exactly what they have. They also have another slide, which I just actually ordered, some prepared slides. They have taken cross sections of the radula and shown that the radula are in rows. And as they are chewing your plants, and especially if it's a thicker, harder leaf, think about a salal leaf or something like that, where it's waxier, it's more substantial. Some of those teeth eventually get worn down and break off. And so what happens is when those teeth wear down and break off, they fall out, the next row of teeth come up, and they chew those down, the next teeth row come up, chew those down, and they can replace 5 rows of teeth during their feeding cycle. Wow. So they are ferocious machines, okay, when it comes to, yeah, which is why they do so much damage. You think about in our yards, because they just constantly are eating that fast, okay? So that is one of the things there. And in the end though, they do process about, per year, 5 to 8 feet of dead decaying plant material in our landscapes. So if we did not have them, think about 5 to 8 feet of extra dead decaying plant material in our whole landscapes, because they are the ones actually processing a lot of that, along with our other critters too, slugs and snails. When they feed, some of them will feed continuously depending on which species. Also the size of the slug depends on how far they move. But some slugs are in a feeding cycle, meaning that they will feed for a while and then they're going to rest for a while. And so the slug that you see today may not be the slug you see tomorrow. It means that one woke up a little bit, now it's feeding there. So they're not necessarily specific to these are like my slugs from my yard. The smaller the slug though, their footprint is smaller. So if I have a smaller slug, maybe their whole life can happen in about 9 feet, okay? Wow. Where a banana slug, you know, it can travel a distance of over, you know, a football field as far as its habitat. So it just depends on how far that slug goes and where its normal territory is. It's based on how big that slug or snail is. They feed best when it's damp, and specifically when the temperatures are between 50 and 60 is kind of prime. Like if you think about us when we're out in the summertime and it's like in the 70s, do you realize how many people when we go out and about, everybody's smiling? Everybody's happy. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. Everybody's just enjoying being outside. This is 50 to 60 degrees is their kind of happy zone. They can exist lower. They can exist higher, but they got those biggest smiles on their slug faces when it's 50 to 60 degrees. So for me, I have an outdoor thermometer and I have a little slug sticker that I put on there reminding me that they're feeding right now. And so that way I can go out there and make sure I'm monitoring my bait stations maybe, or I'm monitoring my processes of whatever I'm doing there in order to make sure that I'm kind of looking to see who's out and about, milling about. Okay. The other thing important about this is that most feeding does take place at night or in the dusk after we're ready to go to bed. They're getting up and rearing out. So they feed opposite from typically what we would. Okay, and the other thing is too, just a quick side note, when I was giving a talk and I had a big tank of them for this conference that I was presenting at, brought it to the hotel so that I could just show it at the conference. But that night, I was hearing them munch all night long. And I'm like, I could actually hear them. It was insane. I've never been, I guess because at the house, you're outside and you're not paying attention. But when they're in a tank right next to my in the hotel room. It was amazing how loud they were, and they just ate all night. It was crazy. So yeah, pretty interesting. So the other important thing about slugs is that's really critical to their existence is slime, otherwise known as mucus. Mucus is the scientific term. For us, we use slime. Slime sounds fun and cooler than mucus. Mucus, in our head kind of feels like, oh, I'm sick. So for today's presentation, I'm really talking about mucus, but we have slime. So it's kind of this is the same thing. It's not anything different from there. They have lots of different concoctions of this, where they can change the consistency of the slime in order to meet what they need to do. So if I'm a slug and I'm crawling along, and all of a sudden I hit a rough, rocky gravel space there, I can thicken up my mucus or slime here so that I can go across those rocks without cutting my foot, okay, and my belly on this part of the foot part. If I want to attract a mate, I will put a little scent in my slime so that as I'm cruising along, I can leave a little trail behind me so that somebody else might want to follow me, okay? In that, it can also help with movement, with smelling, with moisture control and protection. So all of a sudden the temperatures are getting hotter, I can change the consistency of that slime in order to make sure that I'm getting more protection from it, okay? So there is a ton of other ones. The last one I would say, the other one I would see the most of, that I see the most of, is when the slug produces an extra sticky slime, including with a bad taste in it, like something that makes it taste bad, so that the dog will drop it, okay? Or the animal, a cat has it, or etc. there. They will want to put in different concoctions into their slime and change that mixture so that they will eventually that animal will want to drop it. So it'll be extra sticky, but also taste bad. And so in that case, they'll eventually get that out of their mouth, okay? There was one study that we did read about that they scientifically looked at the actual chemical consistencies of the different slime produced at different stresses on the slug. And they came up with 25 different formulations that they could actually make in order for them to exist. So it's pretty amazing that, for us trying to figure out how we could produce something 25 different ways in order for us to exist. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, how many of you have this? See this slime trail all of a sudden, oh, there it is. So they leave trails. We've all seen them, right? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, they can be on the ground, they can be on the side of your home, they can be vertical, and typically our slime trails do tell stories. We need to find and kind of pay attention to that to see what they're actually telling us. And so for those on the ground, they tend to be moving to another location, or they're looking for a food source. They're trying to move in order to maybe gain more food or move to an area that they want to explore more. How many of you have had slime trails on the side of your house? Okay, those, we have the leopard slug there specifically that has to mate in the air. It cannot mate on the ground. So if you see slime trail on the side of your house, it's typically because slugs were going up the side of your house in order to get to a higher spot so that it actually could drop and mate. And so that's another thing that you need to be aware of, is that there's different processes for different types of slugs. How many of you have had slime on your hands before? And what did you do? What was the first thing you wanted to do? Wash it off.
And then it gets even weird.
And then what happens to it?
It gets worse.
It gets worse, exactly, because slug slime is actually formulated to absorb and attract water. So what happens is, by us going to water first, we've now made it even stickier, and you're going to be at that faucet another half hour at least. Number one rule with slime is take it off with something dry first. Paper towel, a rag, something to rub that off first. Then you want to wash with soap and water, because the slime has the potential to carry diseases. Salmonella, things like that can also be done, but you need to go dry first before you go wet, and it'll save you a good 25 minutes at the sink. Okay, so that is really a critical tidbit over there. So we automatically just want to go wet. No, this is one of the things where in the slug, in the skin cells, there are called goblet cells that actually, that's where the water is absorbed. It goes in, and then they have two other glands in which the mucus is actually produced. And it's looking for it because it has to keep moist. Slugs, they dry out, they die. So they don't have skin like this that can help regulate and protect them. So that is really critical for them moving forward, is that they have to have protection. All right, so I am speaking in front of adults today, so I did include the slug love slides. And when I teach this to kids, we don't really go over this that much from this part, but today is also Saturday, so I feel like it's appropriate that we can talk about what's happening here, okay? So the one thing I will also tell you is that, how many of you have heard of David Attenborough? Okay, he has, what I'll say is, if you have never seen slugs mating, he does a fabulous, like maybe it's 10 minutes long video on YouTube. So just put David Attenborough, slugs mating, and you will come up with this video. Again, 10 minutes long, that will blow your mind. Let me just tell you, okay? It is absolutely fascinating to see how this actually happens, because I'm going to show you here in just a second. These particular slugs here, these were the ones that were in my hotel room next to me eating. After they ate, this is what they were end up doing. And so this here are two chocolate Aryans. And this is the male reproductive parts coming out. As I said, remember the mantle holds a lot of things, parts underneath. And one of them is this. These are the male reproductive parts coming out, where then sperm is going to be exchanged. They are hermaphroditic, as we said, so they have both males and females parts, meaning they were born males, they develop female parts as they mature. But then what happens is they can store that and fertilize the eggs from internal if they don't find a mate. If they do find a mate, then they would like to exchange it with others, okay? So right now in this picture, sperm is being exchanged. It is gonna go back into each of the slug's bodies, and then from there, it's gonna internally fertilize the eggs, and then each slug will lay their own sets of eggs.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so the other way to get these two to maybe say, hello, look at me, is these things called love darts. Now, love darts are actually calcium carbonate, a mixture of that. And what happens is when the slugs come across each other, the dart comes out and says, hey, I'm interested. So they can't shoot them. They don't go through the air like an actual arrow, okay, like a dart would. But they come next to it and they actually just tell the other slug, hey, I'm interested in you. You get to feel a little touch, okay, from there. So that's what those are, okay? Okay, so here, this is on my garage door. So this here was two slugs, leopard slugs here, crawling up to the garage door here. This one was chasing this one, following them. I wouldn't say chase because it's not that fast. Okay, so I would say following that one. This one probably had some scent in its slime trail saying, hey, hello, are you interested in me? And then from there, all of a sudden he came up here and then he started biting the back end of the other slug, which is also another way that they say, hey, I'm interested in you. Would you like to mate? Okay. So then what happens is they start doing this circling dance, and they'll see all these slime trails on the side of the house. That's them and their mating dance. That's the remnants of them cruising around there. And this lasted literally for hours. Okay. This kind of ritual of, hey, are you interested? Not. Okay. Then this is what happens. So eventually they get up here to the gutter, someplace higher there, and they will drop down on the slime cord and they will start to intertwine. And then this is the male reproductive part that comes out, where then the sperm is exchanged there. And then from there, they will then eventually, once the sperm is exchanged, these parts will go back in. One of the slugs will reach up here, bite off the slime cord, and they're going to drop to the ground and then try to unstick. Remember what happens with the leopard slug. What did I say?
Oh, if
If they are too stuck together because they were together for too long and they're too intertwined, the other slug will eat the other one if they can't unstick.
Wild.
Okay, this is what the David Attenborough video shows in real time. So again, it's fascinating. And this here, the male reproductive part, looks like a blue glowing flower, like as they're turning and spinning from the air. And this literally can happen for hours. Okay. As a result of this, this is what happens. After the mating happens, what happens? Eggs. Okay, so we've got eggs being laid here. How many of you have ever seen these kind of clusters of gelatinous? Okay, I see a couple hands. Yeah. So I would say look under your containers, look under logs, look under old, if you have a project, like I had a bunch of old stones from like Flagstaff stones that were from a project there, look underneath there, it's like a party going on in there. There was like slug eggs, slug baiting, everybody's, yeah, happy. So at that point, these are some of the results. They can be golden color, they can be white color, they can be clear, depending on the species, and also sometimes the age that will determine what type of egg and who it belonged to, okay? With the egg, if you think about the consistency of a tapioca pearl, so if you think about tapioca pudding, how they're kind of gelatinous, they're a little spongy, that's what the eggs feel like, right? So when they're actually laid, a slug can lay an average of 500 eggs per year typically, and they're in clusters of a couple to up to 50 normally. And when you see them, they are going to be clustered together. And so so this is one important part, is that they're not, you tend not to find them just like individually, like one egg here along the way, they're going to be in clusters. Mating happens year round, but the volume of eggs hatching is from October and November, and then March through June. So when those eggs are laid, that's where we're going to be managing our slug populations during that egg phase. This is the critical piece to winning the war against them. Okay, those that you don't want in your yard. So here's, I flipped up, I had a cedar container, like a pot just on my porch there. I lifted it up, and sure enough, here are the slugs mating. Here are the clusters of eggs. Okay. Yeah. So mating happens there, and I'm sure some of these eggs were probably from previously. It wasn't necessarily happening right afterwards, but I'm just saying, yes, they are from those particular slugs. And then at the end, this is what comes of them. Some slugs are colorless when born, and then within a few days, they'll get their markings as they mature. The gestation is about 2 to 4 weeks, and up to 8 weeks is normal for the eggs to stay in that form before they start hatching, unless you have certain species or you change the environment. I particularly, for my schooling, took slug eggs my freshman year of college, decreased the temperature and the humidity of that tank that they were in. And then I went to school for 4.5 years at my school, at my university. And then my senior year, I increased the temperature and the humidity in that, and the slug eggs hatched.
How long?
So they were dormant for my entire college career.
Wow.
And I wasn't sure what I was going to write about on my senior thesis paper, because the fact is I didn't know if they were going to hatch or not. And at the end, if they didn't hatch, okay, lessons learned from that, or in my case, they did hatch, and all of a sudden then I had something to share. The fact that temperature and moisture is critical, and also what outside influences are on that space can deter eggs from hatching. But in my case, I was in a very controlled environment. I don't know necessarily out in the real world outside if that would have definitely been the case, but in my circumstance, it did happen. Okay. All right, so native and non-native slugs there, we have both here. We have typically, what do you think, how our non-native slugs get into our world here in the Pacific Northwest?
Commerce.
Yep, so they come in on, what do we buy?
Nursery plants.
Nursery plants. Where do you think either the baby slugs or the eggs are in the soil? We don't necessarily know that they're there. And then all of a sudden we pop this plant into our yard, and now we've introduced new slug species into our environments there. Most of the slugs, the non-natives that we can, have come from plant originations from Europe or Asia. Those are the two places where it tends to, our slugs, non-native slugs have come from there. And I would say our native slugs here that have been here for there, they are used to eating our native plants. So if you have a lot of native plants in your yard, you tend to have more native slugs in your yard. If you don't, and the other thing is though, and that would happen naturally, if you introduce plants in there though, and then you've introduced non-natives, they are going to compete against the native slugs, and non-native slugs out-compete native 3 to 1. Okay, so that is why there are some issues with the fact that how do I determine if if I do want to manage the slugs in my yard, am I killing off the native ones while I'm trying to manage the non-native? Yes, there's going to be a potential for that. But you're also doing a better service because the non-natives outrank them 3-1. So if we don't manage the non-natives, it'll just keep getting more and more and more. And then eventually our native slugs won't be here anymore. Okay. So let's do a quick tour. For sense of time today, I cannot spend a lot of time on each one, but I'm happy to talk with you afterwards, or if you have questions about this. I'm going to go through these next couple slides here of just showing you some of the different types of slugs, because I want to spend the rest of my talk talking about how to manage. Okay.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
On the natives versus non-natives. Why would our predators not like the non-natives versus the natives?
Okay, hold on. How would the predators, meaning what?
Why would our predators that we have in the Pacific Northwest
Uh-huh.
prefer natives versus non-native slugs? What is it that on your previous slide, they lack a large volume of predators?
Meaning they, okay, so the predators come into a space. You have native, let's say you have native and non-native slugs. So right now, there's the non-natives outrank the natives 3-1. So what happens is the predator that, let's say if I'm, what am I? A mole or a bull.
Sure.
I'm going in and I've got full slugs there. There are more non-natives there.
Oh.
So that's why, because the fact is there's more volume of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is what I call the parade of slugs. So we're just gonna look at some cool pictures of some of them there, and then we're gonna keep moving through. And like I said, I do other talks if you really wanna learn about species identification, okay? I will also give you tools if you want to do it also on your own to help you out some identify, okay? So first and foremost, we know what this one is, right?
Bananas.
Okay, so are they all banana slugs? The answer is yes. Okay, they all are. So we're like, wait a minute, how can they all be? They look so different. Different subspecies of banana slug, but they're all banana slug. The farther south you go, Northern California, the brighter yellow. How many have been to the redwoods? Bright yellow, okay? Their subspecies of banana slug is different than the ones we have here. Ours are more in this range, the olive undertone with black spots or not, okay? But the farther south you go, Oregon's got kind of yellow and some black here on the picture on the right. The center two picture, the top one and the middle on the bottom one here, both of those are kind of our version, our species of it. And then the far left corner is the bright yellow one. That's the one that's closer to California. Up to 12 inches typically. Here are some other native ones. The Burrington jumping slug. Okay, what do you think? Jumping? How far can they jump? 3 whole inches.
Really?
Woohoo! I'm slug and I'm trying to get away. I can do that. I contract my muscles. So this is what happens. The slug on the right is not contracted. Slug on the left, I'm getting ready to jump. I contract those muscles. I jump a whole 3 inches.
That's cool.
And then from there, I can keep doing that till I run out of energy or I get moved away from my predator, whoever it is. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of jumping slugs we have here in Mason and Thurston County too. So this is one of them. Here's another one. Dromedary jumping slug. So from there's also the Malone jumping slug. And if you notice with these jumping slugs there, look how the percentage of their mantle is compared to their body. It's almost half or more. And so with the other slides too. That's a key identifier to it being that particular native slug, is that the mantle is very large in comparison, where the non-native ones have smaller mantles compared to the length of the slug. Okay. So this one here has it as well. This one, the blue-gray tail dropper. Guess what happens to it?
Drops its tail.
It does drop its tail, yep. So what happens is a dog, something else from behind grabs it, it can release it, just like what other animal releases? Lizard, etc. So they can also regenerate a new tail. This one here is almost sapphire blue. When we just found one over in the woods by Evergreen State College there, let me tell you, it was at night. There was a bunch of us out looking for all kinds of slugs. We happened to find this one and we about screamed and yelled. And then we thought, maybe we should be yelling in the woods with headlamps lamps on at night while we're walking out there. Somebody might think there might be another issue happening, but anyways, it's just a crazy bunch of us and super happy about finding a blue-tailed trapper. So yeah, one of the crazy things. So here are some of our non-native. These are the ones you probably see the most because these are the ones that are primarily, and again, in our backyards. The other ones there are more native habitats from there. So we've got this one, the chocolate Aryan, otherwise also known as the European or black red slug. If you touch these, they curl up in a half moon shape into a ball. Okay, so that's only one that does that here in the Pacific Northwest. So if you touch that slug and it curls up in a ball, that's an Aryan. Those are non-native. And they come in all the different colors, black, red, brown. Some of them actually have this colored skirt, which is this coloring, this marking, this orange band at the bottom on the right, right photo. You can see the orange part there. That's where, that's called a skirt. That's also an identifier of a certain species there. The dusky Aryans, these particular ones found in lawns and grassy fields, things of this nature. Yes, a lot of them, again, they're like, well, they look all kind of brown and the same. There are actual distinct markings for a lot of these here, and I help with that. Hedgehog one, actually the back part of the mantle or the foot here has got deep furrows, which kind of look like gelatinous spikes. Like think about if a hedgehog had gelatinous, instead of hard keratin spikes on it, it was gelatinous. That's why it got named the hedgehog one, because the mantle on the back of it and the foot here has got these kind of spikes on the back of it. This one, how many have seen this one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is the leopard slug. Again, the one that outcompetes our native banana slug because it is also large. Typically 5, 6, 7 inches, can be in that range. This is the one that's cannibalistic. This is the one that mates in the air. Okay, this is the one that is quite known around our world and specifically our counties for sure. So this one here, if you look at the difference, they're like, well, what's the difference between a banana slug that looked like it before? The base coloring of the leopard slug is brown. The base color of the banana slug was olive green, even though it has spots on it. Those are the two differences. Leopard slug, brown, olive green. Think about, again, as a banana slug, I'm from the evergreen state, so it's green background, even if it has spots or not. Leopard slug, hey, I'm from somewhere else. I got brown as my background. Okay. Okay, the marsh slug, this one here is in fields or edges. They love when you have, let's say, a kept lawn, and then you have an edge of an unkept space after there. Those spaces, those edges, that's where these guys love. Those, what we call edge zones there. So let's say like in your area where you might not keep it very tidy behind your garage, but their grass goes up to that border, this is where you're gonna find them all from there, or also in fields, commercial fields too. 3-banded garden slug, these are the ones I have in my area. Again, I live in a small place, a multifamily unit, a condo place. And so, yeah, so this is, I have a small space and they are everywhere. All of my containers from there. So these actually have 3 bands on the side of them. They look like racing stripes on the side of them. So that's another identifier for them.
Racing stripes on a slug.
I know, it's kind of fun. That's why when that movie Turbo came out with the snails on it, I loved it because I was like, yeah, I think this is a slug or snail's ultimate dream is to be super fast. So in their mind they are, but they're really not. So great field slug. This is the coolest one here, is because it has the ability to change its clear slime trail into a milky color. Look like it has milk coming out the back end of it if it feels threatened. So all of a sudden it's sliming across your porch and all of a sudden you come out there and all of a sudden it looked like a clear, and all of a sudden now it looks like someone spilled a glass of milk out there. It's this one. This is the only one that does it, the great field slug. Black greenhouse slug. This one here is in a lot of greenhouses because it comes in on nursery stock that comes into the soil there. This is the one we have the biggest problem with a lot of our commercial growers for a lot of our commercial crops. Strawberries, this is the one that does our most damage when we're talking about commercial crops for specifically this. The important part about this one is that the keel, the back end of this, the back ridge, this is called the keel, and it can be more rounded or it can be pronounced. Think about a keel is where else? On a boat, same thing, can be very pointed or more rounded. This is the same thing. This keel on the back is super pointed. So it's very pronounced there. And this is the one in greenhouses typically. If you find that back being like almost like a tent, it's typically one of those. Last one we're gonna see today is the yellow garden slug. This one here has got cool bluish colored tentacles. They're kind of clear, but if you look at the tentacles right up here, they're kind of a blue tinge to them. They're the only ones that have that. And my favorite one,
That's pretty.
this one is not here in the Pacific Northwest, but it is on my bucket list. And believe me, if I ever get to Australia and I see one, you will hear me scream all the way from there. Because let me tell you, pink's my favorite color, beyond yellow. Yellow's number one, pink is favorite two. And then a pink slug, take my two loves and put them together. Mind blown right there. The other thing about this is that this was just recently found not that long ago. I think 2018, 19. How in the world did this thing exist on this planet and nobody saw it? But it was at a national park in Australia that somebody finally discovered it. First time ever. Bright pink slug. It just goes to show you nature. There's way more for us to learn. All right, so now this is our last of our part talk here. We're going to focus on damage and what to do. Okay. So how do we tell if it's damage or something else? You need to look at the holes. If you have half moon shape on the edge of our leaves, those are typically done by caterpillars, not slugs. Slugs like to eat the center part of the leaf between the veins in irregular shaped holes. So that is a really critical piece. If I'm looking at a caterpillar, they're eating in half moon shapes on the edge of the leaf. Slugs, as you can see in this hole, see they're all over the place. In between the veins, irregular shaped holes. The other thing I do is always look the underside of the leaf to see if you can find this. Who knows what that is?
Slug poop.
Slug poop, yep. Squiggly little, looks like a sausage link encased in slime. We, in our case, go in the hallway out here. Those are our restrooms. Undersides of leaves, that's where their restrooms are.
Huh.
And they encase it in a little slime mucus packet. And it's squiggly. So that's what it looks like, squiggle sausage links from there. So if you've got irregular shaped holes and you look underneath a leaf or two and you see these little packets, that's who your culprit is. You got slug damage, okay? Great. So I will say, just like with the other presenters today, is that we are not going to get rid of all slugs and snails in our yard, nor should we, because again, they play an important role. But if you are, banging your head against the wall saying, how can they keep on eating my prized plants? What am I going to do? I'm going to now give you some tools to put in your toolkit for you to try out. Some of them will work, some of them won't. In fact, we've had two master gardeners live right next to each other, try the same type of slug management practices. One worked in one yard, one didn't in the other. Because again, the smaller the slug, they not maybe have moved as much, and so they're more concentrated in one yard than the other, while other slugs larger move across yards to yards. Okay. So what I would say is determine your first level of comfort level. And if you know that you have a space where you want to really manage those plants, they're your prize plants, and you want to do a lot of entertaining there, manage that space and let the rest of the space in your yard be left for the slugs and snails and other things where you don't see it. So am I managing behind my garage? No, I'm letting it be, okay? But am I managing the space where I spend most time outside? Yes, because I don't necessarily want those plants there to look like they've been, decimated by them eating. So I would say there's no magic, recipe of sorts. I'm going to give you tools where you're going to have to play with it and to see what works and what doesn't. But ultimately, our goal is not to reach for chemical control, if at all, at any point. If you do need to do it, I want to make sure you have the right knowledge in order for that to happen. So on that note, there's a laundry list of plants. Now, do slugs eat any of these? Yes, if they are hungry enough, just like if we're hungry enough, we're going to eat whatever we can find and not necessarily think about, is this the best choice? Okay. For them, they prefer to eat other things, but this is the list that is, they don't prefer. Any reason why these, if you look at the characteristics of these plants, what is something about these plants?
They're thicker leaves.
Thicker leaves,
Waxy too.
waxy, fuzzy. Some of them also have a milky sap, okay, when they chew into them. So these are all plants there that they have to work harder for. again, I'm trying to be efficient. And if I'm eating something thicker, I'm gonna lose what? More teeth, which means I'm gonna have to spend more energy processing in that. I'm looking for soft, fleshy things that I can easily consume. Okay, so that's one thing to think about, is that you could use these plants as a barrier behind and put your prize plants behind them. Because what's happening is this slug here isn't gonna be crawling along. You've got a thicker, crazy bunch of plants here that are gonna have to work harder. And behind it is a bunch of plants that you really wanna protect. They're gonna have to walk, cruise through there, and they're gonna be like, I'm out, I'm gonna find something easier. More energy, they're energy efficient. How many of you have this in your yard? Or piles of other stuff that kind of left from a project? You might as well put little baby signs up there that says Slug Hotel, open, no, or vacancy available, okay? Because all of this is, if you were to go in there and look in there, that's where the slugs go. So if you're wondering where they do go in the summertime or in the heat of the day, they're looking for places. Anything that they can get out of the shade, or into the shade and out of the sun, and someplace that's dark and cooler so that they can keep their moisture, regulate their temperatures a little bit better. So these are slug hotels. Compost piles are another huge, right now, in fact, if you were to open your compost pile, like we built ours in the fall, if I was to lift lids right now, guaranteed I'd go in, I'd find a bunch of slugs in there. Other important things about compost, what? It produces heat, which keeps them warmer in the winter time, which then they can mate and then eventually lay eggs in that compost. You take your finished compost with those eggs, now you put it out in your yard and you spread slug eggs all over your yard. Okay, so that's why we want to manage those before you do that from there. Okay, the other thing about watering is, when do you best water? What time of day?
Early morning.
Morning. We keep saying that, and everyone's like, oh, also night too. Night, you are giving them all the ammunition they need in order to go all night. Meaning you watered them at night, you also have now given all the slugs and snails the moisture content they need that they can feed all night long. When you get up in the morning to water, the slugs and snails are coming in from an all-nighter. They're going and looking for shade in the morning. So the goal is, again, water in the morning, you provide them less moisture content at night, and then they don't have to go find it someplace else. Okay? All right, moving right along. The other thing that we've actually tried in one of our demonstration gardens is sacrificial planting areas. Anyone have done that before? Tried it?
How about the whole garden?
Or you can have a whole garden, a sacrificial plant garden area, yes, okay? So these are plants that slugs love to eat. So we've actually put it, and we did a trial at one of my other jobs here, where we actually put them all together and baited also in that area. So not only do they want there, but we're also managing them at those spaces. And then we planted our other plants elsewhere and also used them behind other barrier plants, like those that they didn't prefer to like. And we actually decreased the volume of slugs in our yard and the damage because of that. So what we did is we concentrated the areas into these spaces where we knew the slugs were already going to be drawn. We baited at those points there, and then we end up saving ourselves more work elsewhere. So these are the ones where you could use them as sacrificial planting areas, are these plants here. But the ultimate thing also in the fall is to, when they lay their eggs in September and October, again, those clusters there, just rake up about an inch of soil from the bed, and those eggs will come up to the top there. And guess what? Who's going to come in and eat them? All the birds. The birds are looking for protein sources to make sure that they've got enough for the winter time and for migration also too. So if you just expose those eggs to the top of the surface, birds will come in and eat them all, and now you'll have less slugs the next spring. Okay? We have to outthink them. We're winning the war, okay, against some of them, and that's where we have to outplay them. How many have heard of copper before? Right here, it's copper tape, flashing. Okay, so a bunch of different things here. This, I would use this for decorative pots, like on the top photo here. It won't last a year or two long, max at that. Okay, it's very thin. Copper is like a tape. Yeah. It is expensive. And the other important thing about this is it works for smaller slugs. What happens is the slug would crawl up here, hit the copper, they get an electric shock on their foot of the body. Okay, this foot part, they get electric shock from there and they don't like it. They don't like the sense of it. But if I'm a leopard slug or a banana slug, guess what I do? I just arch over it and get it in anyways.
So if you have the tape around the top of the container, they could still come up through the holes in the bottom, right?
If you bottom, holes in the bottom of it, that's another way, but yes. This I would use more if, like I said, this is not something my first choice, in the fact that I would only use it in spaces, let's say in a covered protected area, like a porch or something where you have container plants there and you're having issues with it there. Or especially if you have stacked containers where you have like some elevated off and you still have slug damage, this could be a tool for that. Okay, the other thing is, again, it's pricey and it's not long-term. It's a more temporary fix there. Because once it does oxidize, it does lose its effectiveness over time. Okay. But this is one of our master gardeners. She decided that this is her vegetable garden. She took PVC pipe and we went to the dollar store and got the copper scrubbers. We unwound them and fed them over PVC pipe. Okay, like this.
Oh, wow.
Okay, because this is a trial. Again, we're master gardeners. We want to try things out. We're not sure if it was going to work or not. This is the point of us being master gardeners. We like to try things out from there. So we took the copper, put it over the PVC pipe, and then also we had, the other thing is we had to bait inside because there were slugs already in the garden.
Right.
Okay, so we used bait stations to monitor that. And then we just kept and monitored the outside portions of it to see how many slugs were they coming in and that. And it did deter them. They would come to it and turn around and go other places from there. But it did take time to manage and kill the slugs that were currently already in the bed before we put that up. Okay. So is it a long-term solution? No. Was it something fun and cool that we could try out and do? Yes. Okay. But one of the things that did help a little bit as far as to maintain the vegetables for that particular garden space. And again, Dollar Tree or dollar store for this compared to maybe right now, in fact, the last time I looked, it was like $12 or $14 for a roll like this. Look, price-wise,
Yeah.
what do you got? You could also open these up and just put them inside of a container too, like underneath the plant there, and have these out there as another barrier way to help protect it then. Okay, oops, sorry, I did it too fast. All right, this is also a list of all the different things in order to help collect them or deter them. I will say that on the internet, if you were to Google slug control methods there, you're gonna get a bunch of different things, a couple of them being the most common, and especially on the internet, eggshells and coffee grounds are high on the list, and then diatomaceous earth is also very high on the list. So all of those things have issues with us here in the Northwest. So location of where we live also plays a role in the effectiveness of whether or not these items actually do work for us here. So that's the problem with the internet. You put in something and you get information from anywhere.
Right.
It's not to guarantee that it's going to be applicable for us. Issues with eggshells here for us, people spread them out there and then they figured, oh, when they crawl across it, it'll cut them up. Nope, they're just going to get thicker slime on it and crawl right across them. The other important thing to think about with eggshells is that they're calcium sources, which means snails need calcium to build their shells. So now you've gotten rid of slugs maybe, but in this case, you've now attracted snails to your yard. Okay, so that's one thing. Coffee grounds, the important thing about coffee grounds is that they are toxic in high concentrations to dogs and earthworms.
Really?
So you don't want to leave piles of coffee grounds out in your yard in order to, especially if you have a dog or also you care about the worms.
So are coffee grounds bad to put in your compost?
No, they're good.
That's what I thought.
They have to process them. So that's the other part. So that's the other half of my job as the master composter, program manager from that. I'm not saying coffee grounds are bad, they're not, but left in piles unincorporated into the soil profile is not helpful to them. They need to be processed there and composted. But I have seen this on the internet. People put piles of coffee grounds as a barrier in order to, try to control slugs that way. Not effective. The last one I'll talk about is diatomaceous earth. Questionable results here in the Northwest because it is crushed shells of diatoms. It's like a powder. But here in the Northwest, our slugs and snails, they need the moisture content to regulate. So if I am using diatomaceous powder and it gets wet because of all of our rain, which would the slugs need, it is not effective anymore. So now we've spent money, and that's even more expensive. Diatomaceous earth is. So it is not an effective control for slugs and snails here in the Northwest compared to other things.
Corey, would it work in the summer months as far as?
But even that, if you think about, yes, it would be better for drier, for sure. But diatomaceous, again, it loses its effectiveness as it gets wet, and slugs need moisture. So the thing is, those two things never really are meshing 100%. Yeah. Okay. How many have heard about salting slugs? Drowning them in beer. Anybody?
Yeah.
Right? All things that have happened there. Drowning them into a trap. So these are yogurt containers that you can do yourself. You can buy the fancy ones. In fact, I didn't bring the one that I had because it already broke a tentacle off of it. Anyways, this is a big decorative one where it has a hole on it, and you can have bait inside, and the slugs go in there and magically drowned and all this stuff. It was super expensive from there, but or these are like maybe 15, 20 bucks for a pack of 2 from online, where you can put your bait in there, put the lid on it, and then they crawl up there, go in and die from the bait that you choose to do. We use dairy containers, put in holes on the side, and then the slugs crawl along the ground, and then they go inside and they drown. If you have a squeamish stomach, do not open the lid, toss the whole thing. If you don't care about it, though, open it up, dump it out, and then from there, rebait in there, and then reuse them.
What do you use for bait?
That's where we're getting next slide. Yep. So in that part, you can do that. I will say with them is they can drown, if you are just collecting them, you can also drown them in soapy water. That's fine too. So if you had a bucket and you're collecting slugs, hand picking them, drowning them in soapy water also works as well. Cutting them in half with pruners, bait traps filled with beer or yeast. Yeast full, that one's our next slide here. But I avoid salting and ammonia. Least humane way to go if you're a slug. And salting has issues. If you put a ton of salt on your soil, what are you doing?
Killing it.
You're killing your soil. We had a gentleman that came and answered our sent in a question to our question answer clinic. He got so frustrated with slugs, he put a foot pile of salt around his entire vegetable garden as a barrier to kill them off. He also killed all of his soil. He ended up having to have everything removed and had to have new soil brought in because he actually made the soil toxic. So soil salting is not the issue. Here is what is recommended. Bait stations there, you can put in and this is in your handout, 2 tablespoons of flour, half a teaspoon of brewer's yeast. The sugar is optional if you want it or not. And then mix it with warm water, and you can actually make them into little dough balls, or if you thin it out, you can actually just put it more of a liquid in here. Put this in. It's way cheaper than beer. Yes, beer works, but you're spending good money on beer that's not being used that way. So this is, this is flour and yeast and water is way, less expensive than necessarily the beer. So I would put that in there, and then you're gonna bury that in the ground. This one, I don't like the picture of it as much, and here's the reason why. And in science, it says with science, we like to test the procedures. This one, some I've seen on the internet too, that again, they say to bury this so that the hole is at the ground level. When we've done that, all the other good insects also fell in there.
Right.
Okay, we found all these other things that didn't need to die because it was at ground level. When we actually used the larger one and then buried it so that there's at least a couple inches between the soil and the hole, the slugs they can go vertical. They don't have to be, they can just, because again, their slime is designed for either attraction, like to be able to attach to something, or in order for aid in movement. So the slug will still be able to go on. If it's something they want to get to and it smells good and they feel like they want to eat it, they're going to still be able to climb this up and get inside and drown and die. And then you're not getting all the other little critters and bugs and insects there that inadvertently. Okay. All right, moving around. So next is our chemical baits. That's our last portion of the class, which is from history, metaldehyde has been like the #1 slug killer since the 40s. Originally, they used metaldehyde in oil lamp concoctions, and oil lamp spilled over in South Africa, killed all the slugs that were there, and they made note of that, and then it got back to the gardening circles back in Europe, and all of a sudden metaldehyde ended up being the #1 slug killer for literally decades. There are some adverse effects to metaldehyde, which is why it is all these that I'm talking about now are considered pesticides, meaning you have to read the label, and they are designed to kill. And yes, there are less toxic versions of pesticides, but they still kill. And you still have to protect yourself and those around you, whether it's pets, peoples, fish, birds, environment. So these are some of them there that are the most common. The metaldehyde, methiocarb now, in fact, this is what when preparing for this, they did restricted use now, which means you have to have a license in order to use it. So if you hire somebody to come manage stuff in your yard, you need to be also asking them, what are they using? So the homeowner right now cannot access this currently, the methiocarb. This now, because again, adverse effects on those others that I just talked about. Metaldehyde though, again, it stops the slug from producing mucus, which also stops them from moving, which eventually they die. And then the other problem with metaldehyde is that it breaks down quickly here because of our wet environments when we're normally managing this. So I would focus in on other options, right, even though this is stuff that is typically found commercially in our stores, nursery centers, big box stores, all of that. There's products there where this is the active ingredient. And if you see that, you need to make sure that you are following the label and also understanding the effects of what that will have on the other parts of your landscape. Okay. The one thing about metaldehyde compared to methiocarb is that metaldehyde does not have the same effect on birds and worms and that, but it does still have other issues that it does kill other things. Most more recently is the iron phosphate realm of things. How many have heard of Sluggo or those kind of type of products there or have used them, right? They are not, again, everyone thinks, oh, okay, well, it's because it's iron phosphate based, it's a safer choice. In reality, yes, but also the fact it's still considered a pesticide. It's kind of the whole thought process between organic and inorganic. Like if I just eat organic, that means there isn't any chemicals or other things. No, as an organic process, you can still end up applying things on there. It's just a different level, a different physical compounds. Iron phosphate is definitely a different lane of pesticide, but that doesn't mean that it's 100% safe. You still have to follow the label and the rules. And the other thing, if you notice, from when Sluggo first came out, and Sluggo is the brand name, and again, I'm not endorsing specific products, but that's the one that's most readily known. Iron phosphate is, there's hundreds of different products now that still use that same product, iron phosphate, in it. You'll notice the label, though, has changed on from when it first came out to how it's labeled now. There was a big, huge sticker, right thing on the Sluggo's first production one that said, safe around pets and kids. And if you look at the label now, you will not see that. Okay? It's still iron phosphate because what happened is iron phosphate pellets, you put it out there, and then from there they were ingesting them. Okay.
So what is it about the iron phosphate that makes it damaging?
So for the damaging for the kids and pets is that the volume of eating it. And so they'll just end up getting sick from it. And depending on the concentration of what they ate will also determine the severity of that.
So it's just for pets and kids that it's damaging?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because iron phosphate is naturally found in our environment from there. But the problem is with anything you just put out there, you know, you're following label, or maybe you're not following label directions and you're just haphazardly putting it out everywhere. And then what happens is, or piles of it, and the dog comes up in your yard. Sure enough, there are documented deaths from dogs ingesting too high volumes of it.
One thing I've noticed in stores is you're starting to see something Sluggo Plus.
Yes.
And that is really, I'm not happy to see that because it kills those little isopods, the little pill bugs, which are decomposers. He kills a lot of beneficials, and it's just,
yeah, that's
there's no reason to do it.
That's the part where, again, you have the reading the labels and understanding what you're buying is really the critical piece. And that's why we put this part of this presentation together, because what we see is, and marketing is tough. I mean, they will try to, because they ultimately the goal for that marketer is to get you to buy it. Okay. And we're trying to make good choices. I know all of us want to do the best that we can. We don't want to have the frustration of having, no plants in our yard. The slugs are taking over. What do I do? Sometimes you hit that wall and you're just like, I need a solution. Picking and choosing can be difficult, especially when the marketing on the bottles there can be very deceiving. And so that's the part where I'm just educating to make sure that we're being educated in making those decisions, is really the critical piece. And that the plus part is that, yes, it's taking care of this problem, but now I'm adding all this other stuff, which I may not have an issue with. And the thing is, you say the word plus, people are like, oh, that means it must be more or better. So I'm going to buy this one because, oh, it'll do more slug damage. But in fact, it's killing off all this other stuff if somebody didn't really read the label. Okay. So I'm not saying that these are, if I'm looking at the big picture of things, iron phosphate products coming onto the market is a good thing because it gives us another alternative choice with less toxic issues. Okay. But I want to make sure that we're not being, rosy glasses over everything, saying this is a magic product and they'll kill all my slugs and I'll be happy without any adverse effects. You have to be careful with that. Okay. And all the labels should be followed from there as well. Okay, the other one too that's brand new out onto the market, I think it came out in 2020? No. Oh, not my dates. I don't want to say anything. Anyways, not that long ago, okay? And this is, you'll start seeing this one called sodium ferric EDTA. And this EDTA is a acronym for a word, literally, I think it had, I counted, I think it was like 27 different letters. Okay, so that's why they named it EDTA instead of writing 27 different letters on that in the name of that particular chemical. And that again stops the feeding, and they die between 2 and 6 days afterwards. So you put the pellets out, the slugs eat it, and then 2 to 6 days later they die. Okay, because it helps them dehydrate. So my takeaway message is timing is key to disrupting the life cycle. This is how you are going to manage and have less slugs. In September and October, I'm going to be putting out bait stations and looking for eggs. If I destroy the eggs, then I'm going to have less slugs in the spring. Okay, you have to think about it a season ahead of time. So if in the fall, this coming fall, I'm going to look for eggs in September and October, and I'm going to destroy those eggs. Drown them in soapy water, destroy them however you're going to do them, as long as don't put them in your compost pile. Okay, and watch your compost pile also there, and then you'll have less slugs in the spring. And then March to May, you're going to do the same thing. Look for eggs that are being laid, because some of those babies were dormant all winter. They're going to wake up in the spring. They're going to mate and lay eggs again from March through May. Look for eggs there. Then you'll have less slugs in the summer and early fall before the next breeding season. So we're one season ahead of them. Okay, that is your tool. And then if you're ahead of the game, you're going to have less slugs the next growing season. That is the takeaway message. Okay. And also to know that if you're baiting, don't do it when they're not out. Especially if you're using product, like if you're using diatomaceous earth and it's windy, wet, and that, you're wasting your money. So again, picking the right method in order to help you during it also help there. So this is, I have the white flag in my office. I wave it every now and then when I get this about something, okay? Everyone laughs, and it's true. It actually does. It has a white flag, and I have a little slug sticker on it. And it's like, sometimes you just have to wave the white flag. It is. It's like, I'm done. I've had enough. So this is what you do. Learn how to identify them. Prepare your game plan. You could use sacrificial planting areas, group your prize plants together, and manage around those spaces there. Use non-toxic or low toxic slug controls first by limiting the hotels that you have in your yard, and use barriers and traps as necessary. But the single best tactic is disrupting the life cycle. That's your #1 tool. And if you can do that, then all this other stuff will hopefully be able to also support you in that role. So think ahead of the game when you're doing that. So here's a bunch of references. They're in your book there. Oops, sorry. The Oregon State Slug Portal that they just created they updated it during the pandemic. It's fabulous. If you really want to learn more about slugs, Oregon State University's webpage called the Slug Portal tons of information, videos, PowerPoint, all kinds of information, facts, you name it. This one, the slug control in the Pacific Northwest, a new fact sheet just came out December 2023. Brand new information about how to manage slugs. A lot of stuff in here, but also gives you background about the products from there. And a whole bunch of other ones. These are other identifying ones. Slugs and Snails, this land book is at the library. This one is downloadable, there's a PDF online. It's got pictures. It tells you, again, each variety, and it tells you there's a smiley face or a sad face next to it if it's a native or a non-native. Okay. It also has a coin representation, so it tells you how big the slug is in comparison. This is a PDF, and it's in one of my resources also on there. And this is put out by Oregon as well. They do have a lot. Oregon's got nice funding for their slug and snail research because again, their state is so based on nurseries. Nursery plant export is huge for their state, so they spend a ton of money on slug management because of that. We in Washington where's all of our export mostly? Food, fruit and tree crops on the east side of the state. Yeah. Slugs and snails, not a big of an issue there because of that. They got other issues, okay, with that. For slugs and snails and nursery crops, that could be detrimental. So that's why they have more funding for that. Plus a bunch of other books. I did want to highlight the Russell's book that was talked about earlier here about increasing native wildlife and plants. Great book. That's also another way to do it. It's in my list of resources too. I will say that at Northwest Trek Wildlife Park, we had a slug festival that I got to lead, and and also we had slug races. So we dressed the kids and adults up in these kind of pleather suits, lay them on the ground, and then they would have to slime down a pathway. And then the trams at Trek used to have tentacles added onto them. So there they are doing the slug races, and then these were the trams that came through there. And we always sang the national anthem before the slug race. On the back of your handout is the slug national anthem. I encourage you to sing it out in your yard before you do the battle of this. All the slugs will stand at attention. Then you can look out there and see who you're dealing with there. And then you go out there and do your baits, okay? So the goal is to sing the anthem proudly, get their attention, they'll stand up there, and then you can see everything that who you're dealing with there, okay? On that note, whether you dislike slugs, remember that no one can break them down faster than a slug. And for that, dead decaying plant material can't be broken down faster than a slug. And for that, we should all give them a slimy high five. And currently, you are now an official Slug University graduate, and you have received all honors, and with that, including your refrigerator piece of paper that you can put on your refrigerator proudly. You can add it to your holiday newsletter at the end of the year saying, I graduated from Slug University this year. Might be something you want to add or not. But I will say thank you for being good advocates of our slug world out there, but also making sure that we can balance and do that safely with both. And by coming and listening today, hopefully I've inspired you to move that notch one higher up to understand that they do have value.
That's more than one higher, yeah.
On that note, any questions? Do we have our time or we're out?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do any cultures eat slugs?
Yes. So the question is, do cultures eat slugs? There are a couple. There's also a couple companies that actually grow them in a lab, like go through. There used to be a pizza place in Lakewood that you could have slugs as being one of your pizza topping choices. But that's the thing, similar to an escargot, yes. But the problem is that you have to, one thing which I didn't get into a whole lot, but there is, if you're eating them, you have to understand that their risk right now, there is diseases, salmonella, E. coli, things like that, that slugs can carry. The other one, there's a disease called lung disease that is associated with slugs out of California that has already made its way up to Oregon, and I anticipate it'll be here in Washington with that. And that's something that you don't want to consume. So that's why here, case in point, in the end, when I first got to camp, the boys said, well, you have to go through the Pacific Northwest, rites of passage. You have to lick a slug. They're like, this is what we do here in the Northwest. Sure enough, yes, it did numb your tongue, but also you're at the risk of exposing yourself to diseases that are not good.
If you flush them like they do escargot, you put them in a tub with cornmeal and put them in the refrigerator, you know, and change the water and stuff, can you actually get clean slugs to eat?
I don't know that answer. So I do know those that are edible are not necessarily harvested from the environment here. They are, monitored and grown as far as in order to have that.
Cool, thank you.
I don't have that other information, but I do know that there are, the one thing I will say there, I did have read a few of, again, certain cultures that have used them before, but I don't know how they prepare them. Because they have the same concerns too.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to share. I was out in the woods somewhere. I can't remember where. It was quite a few years ago, and I ran across a banana slug that was as big as this.
The farther,
Huge.
that's the thing, banana slugs get huge. We're in there, and then the other thing too, put an environment there, which I didn't mention too, down in the redwoods, they also, banana slugs help, deposit seeds for new redwood trees to germinate in new spaces and open spaces. So they also kind of help with that, and they're much larger there in California, for sure. So it's kind of fun just to be able to, or your friends and family, have you ever taken friends and family, they see slugs for the first time and they're like, what the heck is that? So, yeah.
Have you noticed with climate change that we've had a lot of change in their slugs and their slug habitat?
Yep, and it will continue to change. That's one of the things that I think is going to be, science is going to have the most, just like with any other species right now, but yes, there's going to be changes that are going to come down the pipeline to who we see, what we see, and whether or not the volume we're going to see. We may end up not, because if our temperatures rise too much there and they can't regulate, and again, they're so moisture driven, it will change who we have. Yep, which means it'll also change everybody else that's also here, all our other higher in the food chain animals too.
All right, I think we have some questions
Oh.
off of Zoom, and also, Corey, could you send us your handouts so that we can load them onto Zoom?
Yes.
For our Zoom audience too.
Correct, I will definitely get that from there, and I will send you, yes, the handout, it's gonna be in a different format. The ones in person here got a booklet form, I will do it so that it's a PDF in a other form, but I didn't have the ability to do that last night. Of course, the county was doing upgrades to the internet, so I couldn't send that last night. And then I'll also send you guys a digital diploma, so you can also put it on your fridge at home if you choose to. Yes.
All right, are there some questions,
I think it's
Tessa?
going to.
Yeah, does elevation affect where slugs are found?
Yeah, if it's, again, if higher elevations, not to say that they won't be up there, but the fact is, you're gonna have different ones, and also, colder temperatures can also affect them. So you're not gonna have them, like if we were to go up to the top of Mount Rainier, we're not gonna find them there. But yes, elevation can change.
And then, someone had a question about deterring slugs from hostas specifically.
Hostas, again, are one of those, bait plants, basically for sacrificial planting, do those. So I would put your baits around there and do it that way. I would have a couple of, your bait stations around there, but really there's not a secret, magic recipe in order for them to manage for hostas. They're one of their favorite plants. It's like us saying, no, sorry, no pizza for us. I don't know. I mean, there might be some people that don't like pizza, but it's in the minority. Most people there. Hostas and slugs, it's like pizza for them.
Are there any slug ID apps?
Yes, on the resource page, USDA has got one out, and I will say, I have it. I appreciate it, it's just not that great for us. So I'm saying in this one, so if you look at, this, let's see, this one, terrestrial mollusk toolkey and app. So there's a website, this is the website, but if you look up this word on your app store, and it says app there, you can download that as well. It's, USDA and University of Florida have produced this app. And yes, it has some of our species, but it also has slugs that are nowhere near us. And so that's the one thing when you have these kind of nationwide apps, is not everything's gonna be applicable to who we have. So that's why I'm like, is it that beneficial in an app form? There's an ID tool, but then it also gets you to places where it's like, no, I definitely know we don't have that. And if I had it and I don't live, eat, sleep, breathe slugs like I do, you're not gonna know that. So I'm not 100% sold on it.
Okay, a couple more quick ones. Does Elma still have an Elma Slug Festival?
They used to. I haven't seen it recently, but,
I haven't either.
Elma had the Slug Festival and Northwest Trek did too. I think Trek had celebrated just, I think last year, or maybe during the pandemic, 40 years of it. I know I had, when I was there, when I was working there, I did the 25th anniversary of Slug Festival there. And Elma, we used to share some of the same kind of like display materials and stuff like that in those two.
And someone wants to know if you have a UC Santa Cruz banana slug shirt.
I do. And I don't even go there. And I was just telling Tessa before this. So when I worked at Trek, we used to we wanted to have things available for people to purchase also when they go to the festival. And so I used to work with the buyer of UC Santa Cruz and the Redwood National Park. And we would collectively pool our money to have items created, stickers, bugs, or like all kinds of cards, stuffed animals, etc. So that way, because nobody in the world's producing slug stuff for people to buy over there. So we would pool our money to get certain things, products done to commemorate these events at all of our places. So,
Cool.
when I left that, they don't, but I was telling her, I'm like, the ones that they just did out, there's an 18 to 24 inch slug at UC Santa Cruz, and it's a whole family. You can get them all the way down to like 6 inches. I'm going there in June, and I already told my spouse that I'm not gonna use this half of the suitcase so I can shove all my slugs in there, because I'm bringing them all back. And they're like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna have less clothes. I'm like, I will wash them, I'll wear them again 7 times, I don't care. I need room in my suitcase to bring all these slugs back. So, because I can only get them there, they don't sell them online. So, sorry, I know I was super excited. But I'm just so jazzed I actually get to go in the June. So, yes. Sorry.
Any more questions?
Someone had asked about having huge black slugs. Does anything eat them, or do you have to trap them?
Well, the same kind of things will eat them, like ducks or goats, any of those kind of larger animals there. The black ones, I would say are, I can't say, I would say I kind of in my head kind of can narrow down a couple there, but without seeing them, I would send them into your question answer clinic and see if, we can help to identify there 100%. I don't want to say something without 100% knowing. But I can, by saying if they're really black, I can already narrow it down to a couple of species.
Thank you. That's it.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.